What's up, party people? It's your old pal F here, and I wanted to take a minute today to address one of the questions that I get asked a lot by people who are developing ideas, maybe trying to do their own independent project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And um, it boils down to this: a lot of people send me their like script ideas or their outlines or their character studies or whatever it is, and I see a similar problem over and over and over again. So I thought, why not just make a video and talk about this? Um, and it is the phenomenon of you have an idea, you create a show or something around that idea, and then you begin world building. And world building is a terrific thing. It is, and in fact, I always argue, if you really want to pitch your idea, and if you want to put your idea out there, if you don't world build, then your idea is going to seem like just a one-off gag or something. So world building is a good thing. It is a good thing to develop your story's lore, to really truly like create the world that your story exists in. That is a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. But here's the problem that I see happening over and over again, because people send me their stuff, and by the way, before you send me your stuff, please don't, because I don't have time to look at it. I'm really swamped 24/7 just developing the stuff here for Fountain Pen Cartoons. Pardon me a moment. And again, the other problem is now as we continue to grow and we continue to do our own stuff, I'm getting a lot more sort of cautious about reading other people's stuff, because there's always the chance that somebody has an idea similar to one we're doing, and then that gets into a whole legal kerfuffle. And so anyway, point is, I'm sure it's great. Don't send me your ideas. Anyway, world building. The thing is, what happens is people come up with an idea, they create the backstory, they create everything they need to create the show, and again, that's a good thing. But then they go and they write their pilot script, and oh man, do people get excited when they write pilot scripts. Because the thing is, people always write a pilot script as though their series has already been on for 10 years, and that we're supposed to understand everything about that world. And what happens with a lot of authors or creators or whatever is they forget that they, as the creator, have lived in that world that they've created since the day it was created. You've lived there, you know it, you're familiar with it, and you're the only one. So it becomes a very tricky thing then to sort of sell the rest of us on this world. And that's where, again, it's a good thing if you have all the details figured out of the world that you've created. However, most people, in particular people you're going to want to, sell your idea to, and I'm not talking about studios, I'm talking about Joe Average, who is flipping through YouTube and wants something to watch. If he's got to sit through, a 10-minute prologue about explaining your world, you're not going to get that many people tuned in. Because again, it requires an investment on their part, and they don't know who you are. So when it comes to writing a pilot script, or when it comes to writing that first story for whatever characters you have, whatever story you have, the biggest rule I think you should look at is keep it simple. Because again, a lot of the scripts that I see from people, and a lot of the sort of story outlines that I read from other people, they have great stories, but they're really complicated, or they're really ambitious, or they're really they really require an investment on my part to really dig into the text and get immersed in this world. And again, that's a tough sell. It's a tough sell for anybody. It's a tough sell if you're well known. I've seen pilots by already pre-existing, very successful people, where the first 10 minutes of it is just sort of prologue and world building and setting up the this and all that stuff, and people tuned out. People dropped out because they want a taste of your story. They don't want the whole thing shoved down their throat. So um, if you are developing an idea, if you've got a concept, like I said, it is great to create the universe that concept exists in. It's a necessity. I highly recommend it. But when you start thinking about, okay, how am I going to present this to the public? Am I going to put together a pitch deck? Am I going to put together a series Bible? Or am I going to do a short film to, put up somewhere? Or am I going to do a comic book? Or am I going to do an online web comic or something like that? No matter what it is you're doing, my advice is whatever you've already got, come up with the simplest, most compact story within your overall story that you can tell. As usual, I always go to Star Wars. There's a huge reason George Lucas took the A New Hope chapter and made that the first movie of his, epic saga. It's because it was the most interesting part of the whole self-contained story. And he didn't know, in fact, as I understand it, he didn't believe he was going to have the opportunity to do the whole saga. So he did that chapter because it's the most interesting chapter. And when you boil A New Hope down to its core elements, as far as movies goes, it's a pretty simple story. It's a pretty simple concept, and it doesn't involve quite that many moving parts. It wasn't until Star Wars was a huge hit that Lucas had the luxury of being able to expand all that and create the universe that we now all know. But another perfect example that I just thought of today is Ghostbusters. First of all, I know I'm aging myself, and I know that not everybody out there has probably seen the original Ghostbusters, but the original Ghostbusters with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Harold Ramis, that stands on my Mount Rushmore of perfect movies. It is a perfect movie. Go watch that, because take, for instance, if you've seen it, first of all, if you haven't seen it, pause now, go watch it, then come back. The reason I point out Ghostbusters is because you could take the hotel scene where they go and they catch Slimer for the first time. You could turn that into a 10-minute film. You could just pluck that part out of the entire movie and show that to people, and they would be completely invested. They would be like, yes, absolutely, give me more. That's what I'm talking about. Look at your overall story. Look at your pilot script. Look at what it is you're trying to sell to us, and find the most interesting chunk in it, pluck it out, reformat it so that it stands on its own, and use that as your launch pad. Because, again, what's great about the whole hotel scene of Ghostbusters is they show up at the hotel, and from that moment on, that whole sequence till the minute they leave gives you a perfectly encapsulated bubble of what these guys are about and what the story is. And it gives them a perfect excuse to explain things, to show how the equipment works, they show up, the manager doesn't know what's going on, they show up, and that interaction is a perfect excuse for the Ghostbusters to do an exposition dump, but do it in a funny and interesting way. That's what you need from your first sort of go round in trying to sell people on your story. You need to make it interesting, but you also need to have it relay all of the information that's necessary to tell whether or not people are going to be interested in your story. They show up to the hotel, they explain to the hotel manager, here we are, here's what we do. The hotel manager explains to them what's going on. There's a whole bunch of explaining, but it's interesting and it's funny and it moves the plot along without being burdensome. And that's what you want. And that's the problem with pilots. Pilots are almost always the worst episode of every show because they are burdened with having to be exposition dumps. They have to explain everything. And that's it's the nature of the beast. There's never going to be any getting around it. So rather than try and get around it, you might as well go with it and use that opportunity to go, okay, I have to explain everything here. So how do I figure out a way to explain everything and make it really good and entertaining? And again, that hotel scene is just perfect because they go in, you get to see them use the equipment for the first time. So they have that great scene in the elevator where they explain that they've got a nuclear accelerator on each other's backs and, the danger is set up. And again, it's a simple scene. There's no crowd shots. There's no armies that come, bursting in at the last minute. It's just really simple and contained. And it's our four main characters and the antagonist, Slimer. That's it. No other characters. And we get, that's right, Ernie Hudson's character, Zedmore's not in there yet. But anyway, you get to see our three main characters and Slimer doing their thing. And that whole section is just a section where they get to show you who they are, what type of people they are, how each one responds to the threat individually. And again, it's a perfectly done sequence that sort of brings you into the premise and sells you on it. That's what your pilot, that's what your first short film, that's what it should all be. It should all be a really simple, small, contained segment that's sort of easy for us to digest. Again, you want to stay away from crowd shots. You want to stay away from chase scenes. You want to stay away from, too much, back at the dawn of time, the evil overlord, blah, 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 blah. You want to stay away from all that. Have your characters developed, be confident in them, and then put them in a really, really simple, fun situation that they need to sort of work their way out of that will simultaneously give us the opportunity to sort of, spend a little time with them. And the goal is that by the end of this very short segment, the rest of us should be going, oh my gosh, give me more. Like, that is the goal. And that's why you don't want to, show your whole hand in a pilot. You want us wanting more at the end. So anyway, that's my take on that whole situation. So if you've got something that you are developing that is wonderful, do all your world building, do all your lore, develop it, and then whittle it down to its barest elements before you try and present it to the world. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for tuning in to F-Bombs. Hey, now is a perfect opportunity for you to hit like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the only reason I do these videos is to act as a support mechanism for the cartoons that we're making. And speaking of being ambitious, the one you see being made behind me is called Nightmare Hunters. And that's going to be possibly our most ambitious cartoon on the channel that we've done so far. So please hit like, hit share, hit subscribe, tell your friends, support the channel. We're all just here doing this for the love of the craft. We're doing it for free. We're doing it in our spare time. So please, first of all, thank you thus far for supporting us this much. Please continue to support us because it's what keeps us going. Anyway, hope this has been helpful to you in some way, and I hope to see you again soon. Zigga zigga, party people.